Hello viewers, welcome to this special show. We have with us the Economic Affairs Secretary, Mr. Shakti Kanta, to speak about the upcoming budget to be presented by the Finance Minister, Arun Jaitley. Hello sir, thank you for your time sir. So we are talking about the budget, a crucial phase. Everyone is actually looking towards it. But how is that, what exactly is the budget process? How is it going to be this time sir?
Now first I would like to say a big namaskar to all your viewers. Now coming to your specific question, you see the budget process is a long run process. Sometime in the middle of September, a detailed circular is issued to all the ministries about the process to be followed. Then in the month of November and partly in December, the Department of Expenditure holds meetings with various ministries and government agencies about their expenditure requirements in the current year and the requirements in the next year, and that is worked out. Then parallelly sometime in the let's say in the beginning of January or so, the Revenue Department starts making its forecast of revenue for the current year and for the next year. We need the current year details for the revised estimates in the budget, and we need the figures for the next year for the next year's budget. So in the budget, as you know, there are revised estimates which relate to current year, what is going to be the final figure, and we have the budget estimates which are for the next year. So then when expenditure and revenue proposals, they sort of converge, then again in the middle of January, the Finance Minister starts holding consultation with various stakeholders and ministries and others. So a lot of suggestions and proposals come. Then I would say from the end of January, we really start putting everything together. Proposals are concretized, then it is placed before the government, before the Finance Minister, decisions are taken, and then the budget comes to, all the activities which go on over the last 3 or 4 months. They converge, around 20th of February when the printing of the budget documents really start. So it's a very long run process which involves large number of people, not only within Finance Ministry, but also across ministries. In Finance Ministry, in the Department of Economic Affairs, we have a core group, that is the budget division, which is really the core group that puts together all the documents.
Right. So you're talking about the consultation process. I mean, like various experts, everyone will be coming from various departments and then will be giving your suggestions and consultations. How is this complete analysis process goes on? Because it will be a bigger macro level. Recommendations will be coming from across India. How do you actually analyze all these recommendations?
Yeah, large number of recommendations and proposals come from, in fact, we invite suggestions through the Twitter account, through the email. We also get large
People
number
will be
of,
also suggesting.
We get a lot of recommendations, lot of suggestions. I would say half these proposals or maybe 60% of these proposals have the same proposals which keep coming year after year. So we keep evaluating them because the situation changes. Just because we did not accept something last year, it doesn't mean that we will not look at it this year, because the situation is changing. Last year we could not do something because the situation was different. So even if it's an old suggestion, we know what the suggestion is, we have all the details, so a fresh view is taken whether it can be done. With regard to the new suggestions which come, there are again two parts. Some of them are purely procedural, administrative, which can be done at any time of the year and really do not relate to the budget process. So then we take out what really relates to the budget process, and then we have time, we have specific, dedicated teams for examining these proposals. For example, the Revenue Department have two wings to examine all the direct and indirect tax proposals. In the expenditure side also, the Department of Expenditure and the Department of Economic Affairs together we hold consultations and discussions with the concerned secretaries, and then put some proposal before the government in a manner with a specific recommendation that this proposal can be accepted with these modifications or no modifications, and this proposal cannot be accepted for these reasons. Then the Finance Minister goes through the entire list and it is discussed intensively and decisions are taken. So it's a very wide consultative process where again, a good number of people is involved.
True. And so when we talk about the budget, the most important factor that comes into the picture is the fiscal deficit indeed. Now we've been witnessing all those reports, opinions, debates that are going on fiscal deficit, but people actually need a definition. What is this fiscal deficit? In a simpler language, how should people understand this fiscal consolidation process and especially the fiscal deficit?
Okay, let me explain it in a manner which is as simple as possible. Every family, we have a family income. Now the family income consists of, let's say, my salary. If I have a house property, the rent I get out of that. I have some bank deposits, I get some interest out of that. So all this put together, they are my income. Then there is a family expenditure. Now in the family expenditure, there are some recurring expenditure for buying, let's say for buying vegetables, for buying food items. If I am staying in a rented house, I have to pay the rent, I have to pay electricity bill, I have to pay water charges. These are the, what we call revenue expenditure, the day-to-day expenditure to run my house, to run the household. Then sometimes, we require, let's say I want to replace the air conditioner in my house, or I want to, if I'm in a private house, my own house, I want to sort of add another room because space is becoming inadequate. That becomes capital expenditure. So coming to government, using the same, logic in the case of the government has income from various sources. We get tax revenues, which is mainly income tax, customs, excise, service tax. We have non-tax revenues also of various charges, fees, or for that matter, we have revenues coming from the auction of spectrum or the dividends paid by the various banks and public sector undertakings. So we have income of the government. Then we have expenditure, which is revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure is day-to-day expenditure, salaries and other things. Capital expenditure is something which goes into building of really, some real assets, some construction activities, some irrigation project, or investment in a new, new factory or something like that, or let us say giving some capital into to capitalize our public sector banks. So you have the income, you have the expenditure, including both revenue and capital. Now the difference between the two, and usually our expenditures are more than the income.
Yes.
So let us say my income is 10, government's income is 10, and if government is spending 12, then fiscal deficit is 2. Now from where you get that 2? You get that 2 from the market by borrowing from the market. Okay. And we borrow from, and the government borrows it from the market, and the investors are the banks, the financial institutions. So government borrows that. There's nothing wrong in borrowing, because if you have a certain base income, you can always afford to borrow. In my house also, in your house or my house, or in, for example, in many of our viewers' houses, people do take loans to buy a, you want to buy a refrigerator or you want to buy a television during Diwali. I mean, there are offers which are given by banks and by shops. So we also take a loan, because I have the capability to repay. What is important is how much I should borrow so that I am able to repay. So in that context, fiscal deficit becomes important. So therefore, just to recapitulate, fiscal deficit is the difference between your income and expenditure. Expenditure is more. So therefore, that difference is the fiscal deficit. I have to finance that deficit by borrowing from the market, and I must borrow only that much which I can repay. So therefore, fiscal deficit becomes very important. So government obviously go on borrowing because it has to be repaid.
Absolutely.
And we should not also create a situation where the entire income gets diverted for, if not the entire income, but a large portion of the entire income of the government, the revenue of the government should not get diverted to repay loans, because, repaid these borrowings. Yes. Then you are left with nothing to, run the government and to continue the development works. Right. So that way fiscal deficit is very important, because we finance it by borrowing and we have to repay, and the borrowing therefore has to be kept to the limit of my repayment capacity.
Right. So and then currently I just want how ministry, actually finance ministry and the officials are actually looking at this debate that's going on. Should the fiscal deficit be cut down, or and then finance ministry and the government should go for higher spending, to enhance the growth factor. And so a few people say that no, the fiscal consolidation should be, it should be strict, and they have to stick to the path which they actually have adopted earlier. How is the ministry looking at this debate?
You see, as I explained to you, expenditures are important because government has to implement development schemes. Government has to see that the development works and the growth arises because of government expenditure. At the same time, as I mentioned, what is important is my borrowing capability. Yes. So therefore, what is very important is that you have to find a balance. The balance has to be found between your expenditure requirements, what are the critical components where you need to spend money, and on the other hand, how much I can borrow so that I am able to repay. So based on that, there are two schools of thought. There are people who say that you should not worry about borrowing. You should just, spending is something on which you must give entire focus and not worry about the fiscal deficit. There is another school of thought which says that you should be maintaining fiscal deficit very tightly, otherwise repayment capacity is affected. Now I think the truth generally lies somewhere in the middle, and usually government does a very balancing act, because government is in a position to know what is important for how much of expenditure it can afford and how much of borrowing it can afford. So therefore a balance is found. I am sure your next question will be with regard to next year's fiscal deficit, which I will not be able to reply in terms of the approach of the government, because that's a part of the budget process.
Well, absolutely. The process would be answering my question in the coming days. And moving on, sir, we are witnessing a sort of slowdown across the globe. I mean, this is a sort of a crisis situation going on across the globe, but still, India is looking as a bright spot, and many believe at the international level as well that India would be the driver of the global growth engine. How are you looking at the prospects of Indian economic growth in the coming days?
See, as you rightly pointed out, the world economy today is experiencing the kind of volatility and uncertainty which we never saw earlier.
Yes.
There was a time when we used to say that what is going to happen next week in Europe or in some part of the world, we do not know. But today we have come to a position where we do not know what's going to happen the very next day in which part of the world.
Yes.
Unexpectedly, markets are some European markets or external markets, the stock markets or other markets are crashing. Suddenly you find that a particular currency is depreciating. Yes. Now we live in a global village, so therefore whatever happens in any part of the world affects us, because India over the last several years is getting increasingly globalized. So therefore there is uncertainty, there is volatility all around. I think amidst all these problems, amidst when we are in a sea that is in turbulence, I think India is remaining afloat, and not only remaining afloat. This year, as the statisticians, as the Central Statistics Organization has already given out, we are expecting a growth of 7.6%, yes, which can be considered as very good, given the circumstances. We were used to about 8 or 9% growth earlier. But given the kind of problem which the world is encountering, I think a 7.6% growth is very, very significant, and the government is committed to see that we not only maintain this growth, but we improve our growth figures. Why growth is important is again, has to be noted. Growth is important because growth leads to job creation. Growth leads to more opportunities, more economic activities, which leads to more development.
Right. So you say that we have the strong macroeconomic fundamentals here. So the fluctuations in the markets would be temporary. This volatility, it will be settled down. That's what we can understand.
I cannot say it will settle down, because internationally again what is going to happen we really do not know. But one would expect in the medium term this global volatility, yes, to remain. And our effort in India is to see that we are always prepared, we are ever prepared to deal with any new challenge or any emerging challenge which comes in our path.
Right. So and finally, I'll be covering two questions. We have certain challenges as well, say it from the agriculture point of view or the manufacturing growth or the private investments point of view. Having said that, what are the key challenges from the budget backdrop, if we look at that, and what exactly should people be looking forward from this budget?
What the people will be looking forward from the budget, I think they will know on the 29th of February at 11 a.m. when the finance minister presents his budget. So, because budget has a certain secrecy around it, because there's it has to be presented first to the Lok Sabha. But having said that, I must mention that government is aware of what are the key challenges which is facing our economy, and the various sectors and the key challenges obviously will be addressed in the budget. The government's endeavor will be to address each and every challenge. Of course, people have their own expectation. Every individual or every group of people have their own expectations out of the budget. The effort of the government is to try and see, given the fiscal constraints and given the other parameters within which government has to function, it's the effort of the government always to present a budget which is which is growth oriented and which maintains the momentum of growth and tries to develop on it.
Right. So I must certainly say that you certainly thrown some light on most important aspects related to the budget. Thank you very much for giving
Thank
your
you.
time, sir. Thanks a lot. So that is Economic Affairs Secretary, Mr. Shakti Kanta Das.